What's going on, guys? I know pretty much a large percentage of you guys. So you guys pretty much know, for lack of a better phrase and or definition, that I'm an unconventional conventionalist. If you guys have a question, yell it out loud. We're just going to go through like just basic cutting, shaving. I'll show you what all that is. We won't necessarily go into a lot of the wiring, but I can do a little wiring afterwards if anybody wants to see that. Just because wiring, it just takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and you have to get it to a certain shape initially, get that new root system established before you start really kind of bending plants this way and doing all that. Let it get a good healthy base first. Well, one of the first things we're just gonna do a basic holly. One of the number one rules, and I get you guys have some of the handouts. It's not written in stone. Everybody can log on to Google all they want to, and well, Google says this, Google says that. You basically have to find what's comfortable for how you feel like doing it. Most people find it easier working with a small pot like this with a very nice root system that's easy to comb out. The number one with this size, 1 gallon, 5 gallon, even like a 10 gallon back over here in the corner. If you take 90% off the bottom, and it's always good just to kind of comb it out, but that's shaving. What I do at home is, especially with like harder root systems, and once you get to know your plants and actually where they're grown, you'll see how hard some of the root systems are to work with. Because like when we do this one, I'm probably going to take it down to about here, but then I'm going to take about 65% off the top, probably in the middle to kind of clean up the middle, but just to even it out, because you have to have that even balance. Because since you're taking about 60% of those roots off, there's not enough root system to support everything that's still above ground. That's why you balance the two out. What a lot of people do, especially this last season, and it kind of happens in trends. What most kids do, they'll come and buy this, they'll chop this off, they'll stick it in that pot, they'll bury it, and they'll water it once a week, and it's dead in 3 days. Because they didn't even out, they didn't balance out the upper and lower. That's why I just started with a little basic, just a little rubber guy right here. At home I've got a little adapter on my back faucet that I can just kind of squeeze on, and it does something called a root wash. So you don't necessarily, because of the pot that we're going to go in with this size of root system, you don't have to take any of this off the bottom or any of this off the top. Maybe some in the middle to kind of clean it up, to give it more of that upper kind of growth to it. But what I like to do, because your soil falls out of the bottom over a period of time, and eventually your soil can become, especially like if you keep it right there, that soil's going to wash through those two holes and stay underneath that pot. So eventually it's going to plug those two holes and you're going to get root rot. That's why it's always good to kind of elevate it just a little bit, or add a couple rocks right over the holes to where you still get good airflow, because that's what you really want, is good airflow and drainage. And then you can just set it off to the side. I like to set a lot of stuff off center, and we'll do that with the camellia too. That one's gonna be the longest, but that one's gonna turn out to be the coolest too.
So you don't trim any of the roots?
This one you don't have to. This one you don't have to, because you can keep that whole root system intact because of the size of pot that I'm going into. If I decide to maybe put this into like just a standard saucer, a standard half-inch saucer with no drainage, then yeah, you could take off some roots or just comb them off to the side. Because if you're working with a saucer, then when you put your soil down, it's obviously going to be a little mound right there in the middle, which, if you hop on Google Images, that's how you see a lot of the eastern pines, a lot of the Austrian pines. You just pop it straight in. And again, this one's just going to be the easy one. We're going to do some shaving on this guy. You can just...
Standard potting soil?
I like to use a Happy Frog, which is this guy right there. Unfortunately, I think, about 100% of us know how the system works. There is bonsai soil, but it's mainly marketing. You can use any good all-purpose potting soil you'll need to, as long as your pot has drainage. Because realistically, if you think about it, this gets plugged up, and the primary reason for its death is not overwatering because there's no drainage. It's because the roots aren't getting air. That's why. So, and you always get a good potting mix. Like this guy allows for really good drainage. This one allows for good drainage. And then I would also, I've got some Yum Yum stashed around up in somewhere here. Yum Yum is cool. Basically, it's a 2-4-1 fertilizer, so it's very low. It's all organic. It's got a lot of trace minerals and micronutrients in it. And for a pot that size, all you need is just like a tablespoon. You can mix it in. You can mix it into your soil at the same time, or you can actually wait. You can wait and just do like a top dressing to have it work its way through the whole root flare from the top down. But you just kind of pop it in there. I found this by mistake. Your pecan shell. See, we're just going to do just a real easy, quick one here, and then we'll go on to that one, and then the big one at the end here. The reason why I started using a lot of pecan shell in a lot of the bonsais that I make, because when your pecan shells break down, it makes B1. It's a natural plant hormone. It's 100% organic. It slowly breaks down over a period of time. There's enough spacing in between the shells to where you still get your good airflow, to where if you just may happen to overwater it, then it still limits your chance of getting fungus gnats. And fungus gnats can be a problem, especially inside. Some of these plants that I did are for indoors only. Some of these guys, like your holly, your bird nest, even this Junie, these can go outside. But any of like your rubber, obviously your bougainvilleas, some of your false cypress there, some of your younger guys, even though these are acclimated to outside. And on this guy, I'm just going to kind of clean up the base a little bit, just to give it a little bit more height.
How often do you trim them after you've made a tree?
As needed. As needed. Like I made this guy this spring, but because it's a weeping holly, it's not, because they grow slow, it hasn't reached that weepiness to it. So once it probably grows like probably about another 4 or 5 inches and it starts to go down, then I'll go through and take off some of these top branches so I can keep that weeping look to it, rather than have a bunch of straggly guys like this. Just this guy's not old enough to actually start doing that with. You could get in here and prune some of this off and prune some of this off. But the more leaves you have on a plant while it's growing, especially if you're growing this in full sun, the more solar panels you have. More solar panels you have, the more food the plant gets. The more food the plant gets, within reason, the better that root system that you took off there. Because I took about 95% of this root system off. It was only probably about that thick when I was done. But if the plant gets the natural food and sunlight that it needs, even if it's natural sunlight, artificial sunlight indoors, it still can help prevent your plant from going into further shock. And that helps out, along with this root stimulator right here. This actually has a particular organic chemical called endobutyric acid, and it's also got some B1 plant hormone, but it's a 4-10-3. It's perfect for helping plants go into to help stop plants from going into transplant shock. And this is what This is that this is what we recommend with any planting of anything on property. Just because we live in New Mexico, it's hot. You need to help reduce the amount of stress with this, and you guys will see a huge difference as well. But like, we'll just take this guy off, take this guy off. Right now, I'm just kind of generally just kind of making a real basic shape out of it. You know, because this guy's going to be pretty substantial. And the reason why I picked this one is because in this pot, when it's done, it's going to be in a 1.5 inch pot, but it's going to stand about like that tall, and it's going to, the way I have it pruned, see, because since I pruned it here, you go right above there, and that leaf is going to grow this way. If you prune it here above this leaf, then that leaf's going to grow this way. So that's how you kind of shape everything. You know, if I cut this, then this plant is going to continue stronger out this direction, which will make it off balance. That's why I kind of evened out the two on top and this one, so when this guy goes out, he's going to kind of eventually fall over, angled to how I angled the braid down here. But that's how you can train them and shape them to how you want to, is by, just like roses. Just like roses, you know, you prune above the first fifth leaf grouping, that's going to be the highest concentration to get more of a flower, but also that's how you train your roses on how they grow. And that's with every plant in this entire room. If I prune this guy right here, this branch right here, right above that, then it's going to grow this way. If I go a little higher, then it's going to grow kind of up this way, which is kind of what I want. I want to keep it kind of centered for now until it gets older. Then I can clean up from about here down, which is probably what I'll do. Then that way it'll have that good, nice, clean multi-trunk, and then boof, right on top. But again, if you take a certain percentage off the bottom, you have to take a certain percentage off the top. That is huge, and it's called shaving. But that's just a basic one. That's just a basic one. We'll do some shaving with the holly right now.
So, why would you call that bonsai? Since I put my new plant in a beautiful pot.
Because so many people think that bonsai is a particular kind of plant. All bonsai means is plant in tray. That's all it means. Yep.
So why not? But it's been translated into something else, obviously, because we have these beautiful farms, you know.
Yeah, it's just basically about anything. Anything can be made into a bonsai. You know, especially junipers. Junipers more than just about anything. Junipers are cool. They're popular, but once this younger plant, you know, actually starts getting some substantial trunks on it, and it's still in that size of pot, then you're going to have that rubber tree ficus. It's just young right now. It's still a bonsai, just it's a very young one.
So
like
restricting the depth of the root structure and then pruning what's above.
Yes.
Is that what you would call?
Yes, evening both out. One of the oldest bonsais on Earth is over 350 years old, and it's being taken care of by the same family, the same Chinese family, and it's actually in the Smithsonian. It's a Japanese black pine. It stands 4 feet tall, and it's got a trunk on it approximately 18 inches across. But it is in a large bonsai pot because of the age of it. Probably about maybe 13 inches by about 3 feet. And it looks absolutely stunning. They just sold one online, one of the oldest bonsais as well, for $2.4 million. And there's probably a lot of historical fact and fans out there. You remember the picture of Hiroshima where it's just that whole blank area and the mother and the child walking through and it's black and white? If you look in that picture, if you look about a quarter mile back, there's a Japanese eastern white pine sitting on a bonsai table. That's the only thing that lived in that whole thing. It right now is at the Washington Arboretum up in I believe it's just outside of Portland. It was donated in 1976 by the family. Somebody put it behind one of the buildings. Forgot all about it. Some hiker, walker just happened to see this perfectly shaped dome, walked up and found in a Ming China container, stashed. You know, you wouldn't even know unless you like walked by it. But there's bonsais out there that are about 6 feet tall in pots about this deep, but they're about 6 feet wide, and they're monsters. But it's also only 6 feet tall. But that plant initially is supposed to get about 250 feet tall. So that's how they shrink it, is by doing that shaving.
So theoretically, that would not need to be transplanted.
Not for years. Not for years. This guy right here, just because the root system is so sturdy, the reason why I have him growing in this is so the roots can fan out. So when I take that out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant that in one of those shallow trays. It's just going to be a mound of soil, just mound of roots right over the top. And stuff like that, you do have to transplant more often because you don't have that much of a root system to work with. But do they end up lasting for many years? It's actually called a Diane pot, but it's all it is just a saucer. Just a plant saucer, you know, that you can get anywhere. But they look really cool when they get going.
So do trees not get root venom?
Well, that's why you shave them. Eventually they will.
Okay, so you just have to keep shaving.
Yes. And once you get to know which of the plants are going to need shaving more often, like out of the grouping here, the one that's going to need shaving the most often is going to be this bird's nest. Because the bird's nest has such an invasive root system, it's not going to choke anything out. But like, for example, a lot of your eastern bird's nest spruce, they eventually planted back up in Los Alamos because of erosion control. Because the root system just holds on to that soil so much. But even those big ones like we were talking about earlier, when they go to shave those, it's like a crew of like 10 guys and a bobcat. Because they have to lift them up, and some of those weigh like just a little over a ton, just because they're so old.
I suppose there's an easy trick of knowing when it's starting to get close.
Depending on how big your pot is. I wouldn't be doing anything like this for a couple years. Let it become good and established, but just slightly tip it over and work its way out. And you see that circular root system all along the side here? I don't know if everybody can see that. Most people panic and go, oh, that's root bound. No, that's not root bound. Root bound pretty much is basically when there's no more soil left in this pot. You know, that's a good healthy root system. And again, getting to know your plants, once you start getting into it, you'll know that some of these can be kind of hard. Can it be hard to do some shaving like this? You know, to do it like this. So some people just go straight for broke. Well, that's what we're going to do on this. We're just going to cut it, but we're going to leave a lot of the fine feeder roots, because when you get into here, like when you get into this guy, and you can just comb it out with your fingers if you like getting dirty. Again, some people find it easier, to do this under running water. And once you can start, you can just start to comb it out. And the roots that you eventually want to try to stay away from cutting are these. You see all these fine hair roots right here? Those are the ones that absorb all of your nutrients, all of your air, all of the water, adjust the pH depending on what plant it is. But it's the big thick ones. They're about that diameter, or as big as my pinky. Those are the ones that you guys can cut.